You may remember a problem similar to this, binomial times a binomial. And we kind of used an acronym to help us remember how do we multiply these guys out. And it was called FOIL, which stood for first, outer, inner, and last. So if I multiply these, the first term times the first term is an x squared, outer terms is a 4x, the inner terms was a 3x, and the outer terms is a 12. X squared plus 7x plus 12. And we had lots of time to practice those. Well, what we want to do now is we want to start with this trinomial and we want to work ourselves backwards to find out what are its factors, or how do you factor that. And it's going to take a lot of practice to start to get the idea of what's happening. And a couple of hints along the way I hope will be useful to you. When I see a problem like this, that's a trinomial, I get in the habit of immediately putting brackets down, and then if this x squared is just an x squared with no coefficient, I'll put an x and an x in those first two spots. Well, I need to find out what will go in these next two areas. And it's a combination of things. You want to find a number that when you multiply equals a 12, but when you add them together, it equals a 7. Just in the same way here, we added these two middle terms. 4 plus a 3 became a 7, but I also know that 4 times a 3 produces a 12. So what are all the numbers when multiplied equal 12? Well, I have some options. 1 times a 12, 4 times a 3, 6 times a 2. I also have 3 more options. -1 times -12, -4 times -3, and -6 times -2. Those are all the factors of 12 that I can discover. Well, one of those might be the solution. The second part I need to discover is which one of those, if I were to add them up, equals 7. And you see that these are the solutions right there. So I know that what remains then is a +4 and a +3. So that problem was factored correctly. All right, let's give you an example where we didn't know where we started at. Let's say x squared plus 6x plus 8. It's a trinomial. I want to factor it. First thing I do without even thinking about it is put down some parentheses, and I'm putting an x in the leading part in both of those. I want to look at that 8. So I want to figure out all the different ways I can make an 8 when I multiply it. A 1 times an 8, a 4 times a 2, a -1 times a -8, and a -4 times a -2. Those appear to be all the ways I can make an 8, or a positive 8. Well, which one of those 4 is also a way that if I were to add them together produces a 6? And there it is right there. So that's how I fill in the remainder of my factors. So this trinomial will factor down to x plus 4 times x plus 2. And it's always a good idea to check. Let's multiply them back. First term times first term, x squared. Outer terms, 2x. Inner terms, 4x. And then outer terms is an 8. Combine like terms. And you see that I got back to where I started from. The check does work.